Let's turn now to the role of commercial banks in the creation of money in the economy. And we'll do that using an idea of reserves held in banks and how that relates to loans. So we'll get to the details of that in just a minute, but I want to remind you of a couple of definitions to make sure that we're kind of on the same page when I talk about money. As I've emphasized before, when economists say money, they don't mean income. When I get a salary increase, I get a raise in my income, not in the money that I have. Now, I know that's how normal people use those terms, but when economists talk about money, and certainly when I talk about money in this course, I'm talking about the demand deposits plus the currency, the physical currency in circulation. Now, I want to talk for just a moment about demand deposits. It has kind of an odd name, but what it really boils down to is that if you go to a bank and you put in a deposit of $100, you can demand your money back. That's the demand part. You can write a check, you can ask for the physical currency, you have rights to those deposits. And it's a liability of the bank. The bank has to surrender, has to give up those funds if you ask for it. Now, the second concept that we're going to be looking at is that it is an idea from accounting about the balance sheet of a bank. And to this concept, the total assets of a bank have to be equal to the total liabilities. Now, this is much broader concept than just for banks. It's true for individuals. It's true for commercial institutions generally. And we're going to see how that plays a role in the creation of money in the following example. So let's think about a very simple story where we've got initially just one bank, and that bank receives $100 of demand deposits, or $100 from private individuals who've deposited these funds in the bank into a checking account. Now, from the standpoint of the bank, those demand deposits are a liability. They got to come up with $100 if asked. And let's imagine in the first case that they take these funds and they keep them all in reserves. They take the $100 of dollar bills, put it in the vault, keep it there. And we ask ourselves, well, what's the money supply? If this is the only amount of currency in circulation in the entire economy, well, you've got demand deposits of $100. Okay, so that's it. That's the total money supply. The rest of the $100 is, sitting in the bank's vault. That's not considered part of the money supply because it's not in circulation. It's locked up under in the vault. Now, suppose that the bank says, well, these people probably aren't going to come and ask for this $100 this year, or not all of it anyway. And they decide to make a little money on those reserves, or on those deposits. Let's say they keep $10 just in case they do show up, but they loan $90 out to somebody else. They take some of those $90 bills and they they loan it to somebody in the economy. Now, if you look at the money supply in that situation, you've got, based on our definition, we've got $100 in demand deposits. Now, you don't have the $100 of the currency, that's a demand deposit, plus $90 in currency that have been circulated into the economy. Now, they do have some of the dollar bills in the vault, but that's not in circulation. But in this first stage, what we've done is that we've taken the $100 in cash and turned it into $190 by fractional reserve banking. That's this idea here. The fractional reserve means that you keep only part of the demand deposits in the bank. The rest of it you loan out. Okay, not the end of the process. Let's say that the people that have gotten this loan take it to bank number 2. They've got assets and liabilities. This $90 that was borrowed, that shows up in the bank number 2 in a checking account, which they can ask for anytime. This bank says, let's loan out some of those funds. We're going to keep $10 of reserves. And you notice that both of these are just wanting to hold 10% of of their demand deposit and reserves, and then they're going to loan out the rest. Okay. Oh, actually, the 10% is not $10; it's $9. And they loan out $81 to somebody else. Now we've got, what's our money supply? Well, we've got demand deposits of 100 plus 90 plus $81 of currency in circulation. It's magic, right? Bank number 3. Has got assets and liabilities. They get a deposit of $81, some of which they keep in reserves, and say they've got reserves of $8.10, 10%, and they loan out the rest. So you've got, in this case, $72.90 in circulation, which adds to the original amount. And this goes on and on and on. Now, this is a very simplified version of this. But the bottom line is that these banks take the $100 in cash and leverage it for loans. And this takes place throughout the entire economy. Now, as it turns out, without going through all the math, there's a way to think about how much money can be in circulation for a given amount of currency based on the differences in the amount of reserves that banks hold. And the idea that really links this is what's called the Money Multiplier. That's 1 over the reserve fraction held by banks. Now, in the case that we just did, what the banks, again, this is simplified version, is 10%. It's 1 over 10%. That's 1 over 10. Okay. 1 divided by 1 over 10 is equal to 10. You take $100 and put that into the banking system, and banks will turn that $100 into 1,000 in circulation. Again, not so much that you're creating new dollar bills, but instead increasing the demand deposits through the creation of loans. So when we think about monetary policy, when the bank or the central bank, Federal Reserve in the United States, wants to increase the money supply, they can inject funds into the commercial bank system, which then, if the commercial banks decide to loan the money out, can turn into an increase in the money supply. Now, a couple of things to note about that last process, where the central bank's trying to increase the amount of funds in circulation. This money multiplier depends on how much commercial banks are willing to loan. If they're scared and do not, maybe it's in the middle of a financial crisis, and say that they're worried about loans getting paid back, or they're worried about their customers coming and asking for their cash back, they may keep a larger percentage of their demand deposits in reserve, in which case this money multiplier would get smaller. So the bottom line with this is that the central bank can increase the reserves, but they can't make banks loan out the money. That's really a decision of a bank in looking at its balance sheets and the prospects for the future. But this at least will give you a sense of how money supply can increase under fractional reserve banking.